Swapped at the altar with her twin, she married a fisherman millionaire who wouldn't let her go. Hello. Everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let us return to our main character. The candles in Ocean Bay Cathedral flickered like nervous heartbeats, casting trembling shadows across rows of polished marble. Lydia Hale stood behind the half-closed dressing room door, breath held tight in her chest as voices hissed on the other side. Her twin sister Brielle was sobbing. Her wedding veil crooked, the ivory fabric gathered into her fists. "He wants to revise the property agreement," Brielle whispered shakily. "He says he won't walk out there until I sign it. I can't. Lydia, I can't do this." Before Lydia could step forward, their father burst through the doorway, his jaw clenched in the hard lines she'd feared since childhood. Without a word, he seized Lydia by the wrist and pulled her into the room. The door slammed shut, locking them in a pocket of silence, thick with perfume and panic. "Your sister can't handle this," he snapped. "You will take her place." "What?" Lydia whispered, but he was already stripping the veil from Brielle's trembling hands. "There are 2 marriage contracts your mother left behind," he said, forcing the gown toward her, his voice low and fierce. "One of them is real. One of them belongs to you. Don't make me repeat myself." The church bells began to toll, slow echoing final. Lydia felt herself being spun, zipped, and pinned into a dress that was never meant for her. Paparazzi flashes leaked under the door, white and relentless. As her father dragged her down the hallway, something inside her cracked, not loudly but deep. By the time the cathedral doors flung open and light crashed over her, Lydia could only hear a single whisper behind her father's parting breath: "Walk, and do not embarrass this family." But the man waiting at the altar was not the groom she'd been told about. He was taller, broader dressed, in a dark suit that made his sea-weathered complexion appear carved from moonlit stone. His gaze, deep and unreadable, landed on her, as if he already knew she wasn't the bride meant to stand before him. And somehow that was even more terrifying. Lydia's steps echoed across the aisle, each one weighted foreign. Guests whispered, a wave of confusion rippled through the pews. This wasn't the glamorous heir of the Rutherford family. This man, this stranger, carried the quiet authority of ocean currents and storm winds. He watched her approach with the stillness of someone who'd spent his life reading tides. She reached him trembling. He leaned slightly closer, just enough for only her to hear. "You are not her," Lydia's breath stuttered. Her father's stare stabbed into her spine, pinning her in place. She forced her chin up, but found her voice caught somewhere between dread and defiance. The priest cleared his throat, waiting. The words came like stones dropping into deep water. "I do," she whispered. A pause. Then the stranger's answer, low, steady, and binding. "I do." The ceremony blurred into a muted haze. Applause rose and fell like waves. Hands shook hers without names. Camera lights burst like silent lightning. She moved because she was pushed, breathed because she had to, existed because there was no other choice left. At the back of the cathedral, her father blocked her path. "You'll leave for Driftwood Village tonight," he said sharply. "Your husband prefers privacy." "My husband," Lydia croaked. Who is he?" But he didn't answer. He only glanced at the man waiting outside the cathedral doors, standing beside a weathered pickup truck, instead of the limousine she'd expected. A gust of cold sea wind swept in, lifting the edge of her borrowed veil. The stranger approached her with steps both firm and quiet. When he opened the passenger door, his voice was calm but unyielding. "Come. There's a storm coming." Lydia stepped back instinctively. "I don't even know your name." He studied her, not impatiently, not coldly, but with a depth that made her pulse trip. "Elias," he said. "Elias Merrick." Something in her froze. She had heard that last name whispered before on worn letters, tucked in her mother's jewelry box on the edge of stories Brielle had dismissed as old debts from old families. Her father cleared his throat sharply, signaling her to move. Lydia's fingers trembled as she climbed into the truck. The door thudded shut beside her, sealing out the murmurs of Ocean Bay and the life she'd known until an hour ago. Elias stepped around the vehicle, the hem of his coat catching the wind like a dark tide. He slid into the driver's seat without a word, but his presence filled the space like a storm front moving in. The truck rolled forward, leaving the cathedral behind. Streetlights thinned, replaced by winding roads and the scent of raw salt water. Lydia swallowed hard, watching the city blur into coastline. Finally, after miles of silence, Elias spoke. "You didn't want this marriage. It wasn't a question. It was truth laid bare." Lydia turned toward the window, blinking fast. "No, I didn't choose this." There was a pause, long and weighted, before he answered. "But it's done now," Elias said quietly. "And whether you believe it or not, I will not let anyone harm you." Something in his tone, soft, steady, absolute, sent a shiver down her spine. When Driftwood Village came into view, lantern lights glimmering across the docks, Lydia's heart lurched. This wasn't the fate she'd been promised, nor the life her family had planned for her. She was no longer the bride of Ocean Bay. She was the bride of a man she knew nothing about. A man who had already made one thing devastatingly clear, no matter how she had arrived at his side. Elias Merrick had no intention of ever letting her go. The road to Driftwood Village twisted along the cliffs, a narrow ribbon carved between forest and sea. Lydia sat stiffly in the passenger seat of Elias Merrick's truck, her wedding dress spilling like broken frost across her lap. The cathedral lights had vanished behind them, swallowed by the night, leaving only the muted hum of the engine and the crash of waves far below. She kept her gaze fixed on the window as if the glass could anchor her to the life she'd just been torn from. Elias drove without speaking, his hands steady on the wheel. Occasionally his eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, the faintest crease forming between his brows, watchful, restrained. Lydia caught one of those glances and looked away quickly. She didn't want him to see her trembling. They curved along another bend, headlights sliding over wet rock. A tattoo on Elias's wrist glinted briefly, an intricate crest shaped like a stylized wave. Lydia blinked. She'd seen that symbol before, in a faded photograph tucked inside her mother's jewelry box, half hidden beneath old letters. But before she could ask, the truck dipped down a slope and Driftwood Village opened before them. It wasn't what she expected. Instead of crumbling docks and sagging rooftops, the village glowed warm and steady. Lanterns swung from posts, boardwalks gleamed with fresh varnish, fishing nets hung neatly between cedar beams. Dozens of boats, large and small, lined the harbor, each one meticulously kept. People paused as the truck rolled through, nodding at Elias with the kind of respect given to someone deeply rooted in their world. A woman sweeping outside a shop straightened. "Even in Elias," she called. Her gaze slid to Lydia, her broom stilled. "So, it's true then." Elias didn't answer. He simply parked near a path leading up a small hill where a cabin overlooked the water. Lydia stepped out, catching the hem of her gown before it dragged across gravel. She felt painfully out of place, gilded fabric and trembling hands in a town that breathed salt and simplicity. A soft creak sounded, and when she looked up, a woman with silver-streaked hair stood at the door of the cabin, her face warm and tear-bright. "Oh, child," the woman whispered. "You're here at last." Elias reached the porch beside Lydia. "This is Marina," he said. "My mother." Marina took Lydia's hands without hesitation. They were callous, gentle, certain. "I've waited so many years to see you," she murmured, as if greeting someone she'd long loved. Lydia's eyes widened, confusion twisting tight inside her. "You know me," Lydia managed. Marina smiled softly but did not answer. Instead, she led them inside. The cabin smelled of cedar and sea breeze, every surface clean and thoughtfully arranged. A framed photograph hung above the hearth, Elias as a teenager standing on a commercial vessel, far larger than any small-town fishing boat. His eyes in the picture mirrored the same depth she'd seen tonight. Lydia's gaze drifted to another frame on a nearby table, and her breath caught. It was her mother, younger, sunburned, smiling beside Marina on a beach. She'd never seen this photograph before. Marina touched the frame with a gentle fingertip. "Your mother saved my life once," she said quietly. "We made a promise to each other, a promise the world tried to undo." Before Lydia could ask more, heavy footsteps echoed from the porch. Elias murmured something to Marina and stepped outside. Lydia hesitated, then followed. Down by the docks, a group of men waited, some in slickers, others in worn jackets. but among them stood two men in suits sharp and out of place. Lydia stiffened. "Mr. Merrick," one of them said, irritation thinly veiled. "We need your decision. The council can't continue without your vote. Drake Fleet is pushing into the southern passage." Elias's jaw hardened. "I told you I won't leave Driftwood. You're abandoning your post. I'm protecting something more important tonight." The suited men exchanged glances. Lydia stepped back instinctively, her pulse quickening. She didn't understand everything they were saying, but the tension in the air felt heavy, dangerous. Why did these men speak to Elias like he was someone with power? Influence. As they left, Lydia caught the tail end of a whisper. "Captain Merrick can't hide here forever. Captain, not Fisherman." The word struck her like a cold wave. Elias returned to her side. His eyes softened just slightly at her unease. "It's late," he said quietly. "You should rest." Back inside, Marina prepared tea while Lydia sat at the edge of a wooden bench, twisting her fingers together. The cabin felt both safe and strange, like a memory she didn't know she had. Marina handed her a blanket. "You're frightened," Marina said gently. "I'm overwhelmed," Lydia admitted. Marina nodded. "This place has a way of healing wounds you didn't know were bleeding. Give it time." Her gaze softened. "Elias has carried a burden for many years, and you are part of why." Before Lydia could ask what she meant, a sound outside cracked through the calm, a soft crunch of gravel. Lydia froze. Someone was standing in the dark near the edge of the yard. A silhouette, still, watching. Elias appeared behind her, his presence immediate and grounding. He stepped to the window, staring out at the figure with eyes that turned sharp as cut obsidian. "Don't be afraid," he murmured. "The sea warned me someone would come tonight." The figure vanished into the trees. Elias's voice dropped to a low promise, steady, unshakable. "You're safe here, Lydia. As long as you're with me, no one will touch you." Lydia swallowed hard. The storm outside might have passed, but something far more dangerous had just begun. Lydia didn't sleep much. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the shadowy figure at the edge of the trees. The way Elias's voice had sharpened, the way the night itself had seemed to hold its breath. By dawn, she finally drifted off, only to wake to a soft knock on her door. When she opened it, Marina stood there, holding a folded dress and a basket of freshly baked bread. "Good morning, dear," Marina said. "Elias is down at the docks. I thought you might want to change before heading out." Lydia accepted the dress with hesitant hands. It was simple cotton seafoam blue, nothing like the silk gown she'd been forced into last night. When she put it on, it fit her perfectly, as if it had been sewn with her in mind. Downstairs, the scent of herbs and warm bread coaxed her toward the kitchen. Marina was humming softly as she brewed tea, sunlight catching in her silver hair. "Sit," Marina said. "Eat. You'll need strength today." For what Lydia asked, Marina looked at her a moment, thoughtful, almost sad. Healing tends to take more strength than breaking. Before Lydia could probe further, the door opened, and Elias stepped inside, Seawind clinging to his clothes. His eyes swept over her, lingering just long enough to make her heartbeat stumble. "You're up early," he said. "I couldn't sleep." Elias nodded once, as if he understood more than he let on. "Walk with me." Lydia followed him outside. The morning air tasted of salt and pine. The village stirred with quiet lifeboats pushed from the harbor. Merchants opened shutters, children darted along the boardwalk with kites shaped like silver fish. They walked in silence, the kind that felt strangely natural. Eventually, Lydia spoke. "Who were the men from last night?" Elias's jaw tightened. "People from my past, people who want something from me." "What do they want?" His eyes flicked toward the ocean. "Control, influence, and something they think they have a right to." Lydia frowned. "And do they know?" His voice dropped, unwavering. "They don't have any right to touch this village. Or you." The words hit her unexpectedly protective, steady, too sincere to dismiss. Before she could respond, someone called out from a nearby dock. Captain Merrick. Lydia turned. A fisherman waved them over. Elias muttered something under his breath, almost embarrassed. "You're a captain," Lydia said quietly. Elias hesitated. "I was. A long time ago. But they still call you. Names don't matter here." But Lydia could see in the way the villagers deferred to him in the quiet respect woven into every glance that it did matter. Elias Merrick wasn't just a man who fished, he was someone important, someone the village trusted, someone people relied on. She followed him to the dock where the fisherman held up a tangled net. "Storm tore it again," the man said. "Didn't want to patch it wrong." Elias crouched beside the net, his fingers moving with practiced ease. Lydia watched the way he worked, methodical, precise, gentle, despite the strength in his hands. When he finished, the fisherman grinned. "Knew you'd fix it right. You always do." Elias nodded and stood. Lydia followed him as they continued along the boardwalk. "You're different here," she said softly. "Calmer." "This is home," he replied. "Everything else is noise." Lydia wondered what kind of noise had chased him here, what kind of life he'd lived before hiding in Driftwood. They walked past a row of market stalls until Marina's voice called after them. She hurried toward them with a worried expression. "Elias," she said, "someone left this at the door." She handed him a sealed envelope. Elias's brows knit tightly as he opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper with only 4 words. "She doesn't belong here." Lydia felt the blood leave her face. Elias crushed the note in his fist. "Ignore it," he said firmly. "I can't ignore it," Lydia whispered. "You're safe. How can you be sure?" Her voice shook. Elias faced her fully, the morning light carving gold into his features. "Because I won't let anything happen to you." There was something raw in his promise, something that made her chest tighten. She didn't know him well, didn't understand why he cared, but she believed him. Before she could speak, footsteps pounded down the path. Captain Trouble at the South Pier. Elias cursed under his breath and sprinted toward the docks. Lydia and Marina hurried after him. When they reached the pier, a small crowd had gathered. A boat drifted near the rocks, damaged, half-sinking ropes torn free. "That's not one of ours," someone muttered. "Driftwood boats don't break like that." Elias leapt onto the dock and grabbed a pole, pulling the wrecked skiff closer. Lydia spotted markings on the hull, strange geometric symbols, nothing like the village's fleet. Marina's face paled. "Those aren't fishermen. They're from Drake Fleet." Lydia's pulse skittered. Drake Fleet. She had heard that name whispered before on the news and business journals. A corporate maritime empire expanding aggressively, swallowing coastal towns, buying out harbors. And now, they were here. Elias inspected the wreck, his expression turning grim. "They're sending warnings." Lydia shivered. "Because of you, because of what I said no to." The water sloshed dark beneath the boat, and for a moment Lydia thought she saw movement beneath the surface. Slow, deliberate, too large to be a fish. She blinked hard. The shape vanished. Marina gripped Lydia's hand. "We need to leave. Now." As they stepped back, Elias called to his men. "Pull it out. We need to examine it." But before they could move, the boat jolted sharply. Pulled from below, gasps erupted. The wreck disappeared beneath the water, in a violent rip dragged into the depths by something unseen. Lydia stepped back, heart pounding. "What was that?" she whispered. Elias didn't answer. His gaze stayed on the dark water jaw, set eyes storm hard. Whatever he was hiding, it went deeper than corporate conflict, and it was coming for Driftwood Village. Lydia tried to keep her breathing steady as Elias led her and Marina away from the pier. The villagers stayed behind, murmuring anxiously as they studied the dark water where the wreck had vanished. Lydia kept glancing over her shoulder, half expecting something else to surge from beneath the waves, some unseen force drawn by their presence. The morning sun glittered across the surface, but the glimmers only made the depths seem darker. Inside the cabin, Marina shut the door firmly, her hands trembling just enough for Lydia to notice. "What happened back there?" Lydia asked. Marina exchanged a long look with Elias before answering. "Drake Fleet has been trying to buy up everything from Ridge Harbor to the northern coast. They want this village too. They want the entire passage." She hesitated. "And Elias is the last person standing in their way." Lydia frowned. "But he's just one man." "No." Marina's gaze softened with pride and grief all at once. "He's Captain Elias Merrick, son of Rowan Merrick, an heir to the only fleet that ever stood equal to Drake's." Lydia stared at Elias. He looked away. "You should rest a bit," Elias said quietly. "You didn't sleep last night." "I'm not tired." Her voice wavered. I'm scared. Elias's jaw clenched. Then stay close to me. Marina excused herself to fetch herbs for tea. As she stepped outside, Lydia turned fully to Elias. You need to tell me what's going on. Elias didn't answer at first. He walked toward the window, gazing out at the sea like he was searching for an opening in his own thoughts. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. I wasn't supposed to live here forever. My father built this village as protection. I was meant to expand it, anchor our fleets together. Drake Fleet wanted a merger, but my father refused. When he died, they came after me instead. Lydia felt a chill. But why drag me into it? Elias turned toward her slowly. Because they know you're important to me now. Her breath caught. We barely know each other. Doesn't matter. The words came out rougher than he intended. He exhaled. This village is my life. My mother is my heart. And now. He stopped himself. You're under my protection, Lydia, whether you want that or not. Before she could respond, Marina burst back inside, breathless. Elias, you need to come outside. They followed her out and found half the village gathered near the cliffs. 2 fishing boats had returned early, the crews climbing out with shaken expressions. One of them, a broad-shouldered man named Bram, approached Elias. Captain, you need to see this. He handed Elias a jagged metal shard warped and corroded at one end. Lydia recognized the carving immediately. It's the same symbol as the wrecked boat. Elias nodded grimly. Drake Fleet's scouting markers. But why leave something like that, Lydia asked. To show us they're closer than we think. Marina pulled Lydia aside. Come, dear. I need help preparing lunch for the crews. A warm meal will calm their nerves. Lydia followed her into the communal kitchen down the boardwalk. Women and a few older fishermen worked around heavy tables chopping vegetables, kneading dough, tending to pots simmering with broth. Lydia found herself positioned between a grandmotherly woman with kind eyes and a tall girl with freckles who kept glancing curiously at her. The freckled girl finally spoke. Is it true you're the girl Elias married by accident? Not exactly by accident, Lydia said softly. More like forced circumstance. Well, the girl grinned. The whole village is already obsessed with you. Half the unmarried boys want to know if you have a sister. Lydia flushed. I don't. Pity. They were ready to line up. The grandmotherly woman nudged Lydia with an elbow. Don't listen to her. Boys talk, but none of them hold a candle to Elias. Lydia looked down at the herbs she was chopping. I barely know him. You will, the woman said knowingly. The sea gives people what they need, not what they expect. Before Lydia could answer, Marina called across the room. Lydia, dear, could you fetch some jars from the back? She stepped into the storage room and froze. A man in a dark jacket was crouched near an open window, rummaging through crates. He looked up sharply, startled to see her. For a moment they stared at each other, then his face twisted into a smirk. So this is the bride, he murmured. Captain Merrick's new soft spot. Lydia backed away. Get out, she whispered. The man rose slowly, lifting a jar he'd been studying. You know, Drake Fleet would pay well for someone like you. Beautiful, connected, helpless. Lydia grabbed the closest object, a wooden ladle, and held it up like a weapon. Touch me, and what, sweetheart, you'll hit me with that spoon. Before he could move forward, a shadow filled the doorway. Elias. He didn't hesitate. He grabbed the man by the collar, slammed him against the wall, and pressed a forearm into his throat. You picked the wrong village, he growled. The man choked, clawing at Elias's arm. Marina and several villagers rushed in, pulling the intruder away before Elias's fury turned lethal. He was dragged outside, tied and guarded until the council decided what to do with him. When the crowd dispersed, Lydia stood alone with Elias in the storage room. Her hands were still shaking. Elias stepped closer, voice low. Are you hurt? She shook her head, but when he reached out and brushed her wrist gently, she felt everything she'd been holding inside unravel. Fear, shock, confusion, and beneath it all, something uncomfortably warm. You came fast, she whispered. I always will. Their eyes held silent and charged. Then Elias stepped back as if remembering himself. You're safe. I won't let anyone near you again. Lydia swallowed hard. I believe you, but outside the captured intruder shouted over the crashing surf, Drake Fleet is coming, Captain. You can't protect her forever. Lydia looked at Elias, and for the first time she saw it clearly. The storm gathering behind his calm, the weight he carried, and the danger she was now in. Driftwood Village was no longer just a refuge. It was a target. The intruder's shouts echoed long after he'd been dragged down to the holding shed near the cliffs, his voice carried and distorted by the wind until it sounded less like a man and more like a warning. Lydia lingered near the doorway of the cabin as Elias stepped out onto the porch, running a hand through his hair, as though trying to ease the tension coiled beneath his skin. "He won't be the last," Marina murmured, joining him with a quiet, heavy step. Lydia watched Elias turn toward his mother, something sharp flickering in his eyes. "I know." Marina touched his arm gently. "We'll handle it, like we always have." Elias didn't reply. Instead, he walked past Lydia toward the open path leading down to the docks. She followed without thinking, drawn by worry, drawn by him. The late afternoon sky had clouded, darkening the sea into a restless gray. Elias stopped near the edge of the pier and stared into the horizon silent. "Tell me what you're thinking," Lydia said softly. "That I shouldn't have brought you here," he replied. Her breath hitched. "Why not? It puts you in danger." "You didn't bring me here," she reminded him. "Fate did. Circumstance did. Your mother did. My mother did." He let out a quiet, humorless breath. "You deserve a life untouched by this." "But I'm here," she insisted, "and I'm not leaving." He turned then slowly, deliberately, and his eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that sent a shiver through her. "You're not afraid?" he asked. "I am," she whispered. "But not of you." A flicker of something warm and pain passed over his face. But before either of them could say more, the heavy clang of the harbor bell cut through the air. Bram came running, breathless. "Elias, we found something." Elias followed him toward the boathouse. Lydia hurried after them, heart pounding. Inside, the villagers crowded around a table where an unfamiliar object lay, an obsidian black cylinder with blinking amber lights. "A tracking beacon," Elias muttered. Lydia flinched. "They're tracking the village." "Not the village," he said. "Me." A quiet dread settled around them. Marina stepped forward, lifting the beacon with a cloth-wrapped hand. "There's more." She nodded at a second crate in the corner. Bram pried it open. Inside were long steel rods engraved with Drake Fleet's triangular insignia. Lydia's pulse quickened as realization set in. "These are weapons." "Markers," Elias corrected, "for staking claim." To what she asked. He stared at her as though the answer weighed too much. "To Driftwood, to my family's waters, to everything we protect." Before Lydia could form a response, the boathouse doors burst open. A boy no older than 12 sprinted inside, panting wildly. "Captain, there's someone on the ridge." Elias's expression hardened instantly. "Who? I don't know," the boy stammered. "He's not from around here. He's asking for the girl." Lydia froze. Elias was already moving. They sprinted up the winding cliff path, the wind slicing through their clothes. When they reached the ridge, a lone man stood waiting by the old lighthouse. His suit was soaked from ocean spray, his hair matted to his forehead. The instant he saw Lydia, his expression of relief twisted into something far darker. Finally, he breathed. Elias stepped between them. "State your name." The man tilted his head, smirking. "Why are you going to report me?" "Last chance," Elias warned. The smirk widened. "I know who you are, Captain Merrick. Drake Fleet knows too. We know everything, your alliances, your father's maps, your territory lines." He shifted his gaze to Lydia, eyes narrowing in unsettling delight. "And we know about her." Lydia stepped back. Elias didn't move. "She's none of your business," Elias said. "Oh, but she is," the man whispered. "Because your weakness is the one thing we can profit from." The man reached into his coat. Elias reacted instantly, shoving Lydia behind him and lunging forward just as Bram and 2 others arrived. A struggle erupted. Metal clattered across rock. Within seconds, the man was pinned, arms wrenched back. Elias snatched the weapon the intruder had drawn, a steel flare gun, modified with a sharp blade attached beneath the barrel. "Take him to the shed," Elias ordered. As they hauled him away, the man twisted his head and called out to Lydia. The Merricks won't survive what's coming, and neither will you, silence settled after the shouting faded. Lydia wrapped her arms around herself, trembling. Elias's voice softened. You're shaking. I'm fine, she lied. You don't have to pretend. Something inside her broke. She looked up at him, really looked, and her voice came out small. Why are they after me? Elias hesitated, then stepped closer. Because you matter, he said, more than you know. Lydia's throat tightened. To you, his answer was immediate, low, unshielded. Yes. The word hung between them, fragile and terrifying, but the moment shattered when Marina arrived, her face pale. Elias. He had something else in his pocket. She handed him a folded map. Lydia leaned in. It was Driftwood Village, marked with red X's. Every X hovered over a route leading straight to the Merrick cabin. Lydia felt the bottom drop out of her stomach. They're not tracking the village, she whispered. They're tracking me. Elias's grip tightened on the map, eyes blazing. Not for long, he said. I won't let them get close again. As he tore the map in half, Lydia had the strangest sinking feeling Drake Fleet wasn't just coming for Driftwood. They were coming for her fate, her identity, and the secrets her mother had buried in this village, long before she ever arrived. The storm reached Driftwood before sunset, dragging a wall of dark clouds across the horizon. Wind whipped through the village, rattling shutters and stirring the sea into a frenzy. Lydia stood on the Merrick cabin porch, the hem of her borrowed dress snapping in the air as she watched the waves rise higher and higher. Elias paced below, barking orders to the fishermen helping secure the boats. Lanterns flickered along the boardwalk, giving everything an urgent flickering glow. Marina joined Lydia, placing a steadying hand on her shoulder. Storms like this happen every few years, she said gently. But the timing, this one feels deliberate. Deliberate, Lydia echoed. Marina glanced at Elias. Drake Fleet is known for manipulating tides with deep channel dredgers. They disrupt the currents, sometimes even cause localized whirlpools. Lydia felt a chill unrelated to the wind. They can control the sea. They can weaponize it, Marina corrected. And tonight, they are. Elias jogged up the steps, worry etched deeply onto his face. We need to get inside. It's getting worse. Marina hurried into the cabin. Lydia didn't move. Elias, she whispered, tell me what you're not saying. He paused beside her, rain beating on his lashes. Tonight's storm isn't natural. It's a setup. Drake Fleet wants chaos, and they want to flush out whatever lead they think I'm hiding. What lead, she asked. You. Her breath caught. Why me? Elias swallowed hard. Because you're not just anyone, Lydia. Your mother, she wasn't just a visitor here. She was part of my father's research team. Lydia stared. That's impossible. My mother worked for a coastal foundation, not an Merrick marine research project, Elias said quietly, focused on tracking undercurrent patterns in the Southern Passage, the same passage Drake Fleet has been trying to claim. Lydia felt the ground tilt. Why didn't she tell me? Because she didn't want you tangled up in this. But I am, Lydia whispered, whether I wanted to be or not. Elias reached out slowly, brushing a wet strand of hair from her cheek. Tonight I'll explain everything. But first, inside. A loud horn blared from offshore. Lydia froze. What was that? Elias looked toward the sea and cursed. They're here. Lights appeared far beyond the breakers, harsh, artificial beams slicing through the storm. The villagers gathered, whispering in alarm. Several small black boats cut through the waves like blades. Marina rushed out of the cabin. Elias, they're approaching fast. I see them. Elias grabbed Lydia's wrist. Come on. They ran inside as the first boat hit the outer docks with a violent crash. Rain hammered the roof. Thunder rolled overhead. The cabin suddenly felt far too small. Elias pushed furniture against the doors while Marina lit oil lamps. Lydia stood in the center of the room, shaking. Tell me everything, she demanded, now. I need to understand why they're willing to do all this. Elias paused, breathing hard. Then he nodded. My father, Rowan Merrick, led a project years ago, mapping hidden undercurrents beneath the Southern Passage. They discovered something dangerous, a narrow submarine channel that cuts directly beneath Drake Fleet's main route. Whoever controls that data controls the entire coastline. And my mother, Lydia, asked. She created the encryption algorithm that hides the location of the channel, Elias said. An algorithm only her bloodline can unlock. Lydia blinked slowly. You're saying I'm the key? Yes. The storm howled, the cabin shook. Marina whispered a prayer. Elias stepped closer, voice urgent. Drake Fleet thinks your mother left the final map with us, which is partly true. But the map is useless without you. But I didn't even know I know, Elias replied. Your mother hid it so well even you couldn't find it. Another crash echoed outside. Voices shouted through the wind. Lydia's pulse jumped. They're getting closer. Elias grabbed her hands. His voice dropped to a fierce whisper. You're not alone, and I will not let them take you. Before she could respond, the window shattered. A grappling hook tore through the frame and embedded into the floorboards. Lydia shrieked as the cabin door rattled violently. Elias pulled her behind him, knife in hand, as shadows moved outside through sheets of rain. Marina, get to the back room, Elias ordered. But Marina stood her ground, clutching a heavy iron poker. Not without you. The door cracked. We need the girl, a voice shouted from outside. Bring her out and no one gets hurt. Elias's eyes went dark. Over my dead body. Lydia grabbed his arm. We have to run. They'll chase us. Then we run faster, she insisted. Marina flung open the back door. Go, lightning flashed, and for a split second Lydia saw 3 figures climbing up the cliff path toward them. Elias cursed. They've got the house surrounded. What do we do? Lydia whispered, voice trembling. Elias looked at her with a certainty that stole her breath. We jump, Marina gasped. Elias, we don't have a choice. The cliff behind the cabin dropped into a narrow inlet, dangerous but deep enough to break a fall. Elias looked at Lydia one last time. Rain ran down his face like silver. Trust me. She swallowed hard, always. He took her hand. Together they ran. Behind them, the door finally burst open, and as armed men stormed the cabin, Lydia and Elias leapt into the raging sea, leaving Drake Fleet screaming at the edge of the cliff as the storm swallowed them whole. The sea swallowed them with a violence Lydia had never imagined. Cold water surged over her head, darkness folding around her as the storm churned the waves into wild spiraling currents. She reached blindly, panic clawing through her chest until Elias's hand found hers, beneath the surface gripping tight. They rose together, gasping as they broke through the foaming water. This way, Elias shouted over the roar. The inlet current dragged them sideways, slamming them against jagged rocks before sweeping them toward a narrow channel between 2 cliffs. Lydia kicked hard, lungs burning her dress, tangling around her legs. Elias pulled her close and swam fiercely, keeping her above the water until the storm currents abruptly shifted. A whirlpool formed behind them just yards away. Lydia cried out as the pull nearly tore her from Elias's grasp. He wrapped an arm around her waist muscles, straining and angled them toward a small outcropping beneath the cliff. Hold on, he yelled. He pushed her onto the slippery ledge first, then pulled himself up beside her, both of them bedraggled and shivering. Lydia collapsed against the cliff wall, trembling violently. Are you hurt? Elias asked, cupping her face, checking her limbs, his voice frantic despite the roar around them. I don't know, she stammered. Everything hurts, but I'm alive. Relief softened the harsh lines on his face. Good. That's all that matters. Thunder cracked overhead, shaking loose bits of rock. The storm raged above them, while the whirlpool churned below like a hungry mouth. Lydia clung to Elias's soaked shirt. They'll find us. No, he said, climbing to his feet. Not here. He reached upward, fingers searching for crevices in the cliff. We're right under the tide caverns. Come on. Tide caverns, Lydia repeated weakly. A network of natural tunnels. My father used them. Your mother too. They'll keep us hidden. He helped her climb. Bit by bit, hand over hand, they scaled the wet stone until Elias pulled her into a narrow cavern entrance, glowing faintly with reflected lightning. The moment they stepped inside, the sound of the storm dulled. Sea spray shimmered off the walls like scattered glass. Lydia leaned on him heavily, shivering uncontrollably. You're freezing, Elias murmured. He pulled off his soaked jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders, rubbing her arms briskly until warmth returned to her cheeks. Lydia met his gaze, breath hitching. You saved my life. He swallowed. I'll always save you. The fierce sincerity in his voice sent a tremor through her chest. Not fear, but something far deeper. She opened her mouth to speak, but he held up a hand. Listen. Footsteps echoed faintly from somewhere beyond the cavern, heavy echoing approaching. Lydia stiffened. Elias grabbed her hand and led her deeper into the tunnel system. They moved quickly through twisting passages lit only by faint cracks of lightning from above. Eventually, the sound of footsteps faded. Only then did Elias slow. They reached a wider chamber filled with old equipment, rusted oxygen tanks, waterproof crates marked with faded insignia, and remnants of the old Merrick research station. Lydia gasped softly. My mother. She was here. Yes, Elias said. Often. She and my father worked side by side. He approached a metal locker and pried it open. Inside lay a weathered journal, its leather cover cracked from years of salt and moisture. This is hers, he said quietly, handing it to Lydia. Her hand shook as she opened the first page. A single line stretched across it in delicate handwriting. For my daughters, if the sea ever calls you home. Lydia covered her mouth, tears filling her eyes. She turned the pages carefully. Maps, charts, notes in her mother's voice. A family story she'd never known unfolding in her palms. She left this for me, Lydia whispered. And for her promise, Elias added, the one she made to my father. What promise? Elias hesitated, then spoke with quiet gravity. They vowed that if danger ever returned to Driftwood, their children would protect each other. But I didn't even know you. His eyes softened painfully. I did. Lightning flashed overhead, illuminating the cavern and something unspoken between them. Lydia's voice broke. You're telling me we were supposed to meet. My father told me your name before I was old enough to spell it, Elias said. Told me your mother saved him. Told me our families were bound together. He looked at her intently. I was meant to find you. Maybe even meant to love you. Her breath caught at the word love, a word too raw, too fragile. But before she could answer, the cavern trembled. Lydia gasped. What was that? Elias grabbed her arm. They're detonating charges above us, trying to collapse the entrances. Why? To trap us, or flush us out. Dust rained from the ceiling as another explosion sounded somewhere overhead. Elias dragged her toward a narrow tunnel. There's one exit they don't know about, a hidden shaft my father used. Boom! Cracks formed along the cavern wall. Lydia's heart pounded. Elias, I've got you. Don't look back. He led her into the darkness, their hands locked tightly as the Storm and Drake fleet tore the cliffs apart behind them. Together, they ran, guided by memory and instinct, stumbling toward the last safe exit, toward whatever came next. And for the first time since she arrived in Driftwood Village, Lydia didn't feel like she was running from danger. She felt like she was running with the person who was meant to change her whole life. The hidden shaft was barely wider than Lydia's shoulders, but Elias guided her through it with steady hands, whispering directions whenever the tunnel split or dipped. The air grew colder as they descended, the roar of the collapsing caverns fading behind them. Only the distant pulse of the sea and their synchronized breaths filled the dark. When they finally emerged, it was into a hollow chamber illuminated by soft blue light. Bioluminescent algae coated the walls, casting shimmering reflections across the underground pool that connected to the open ocean. Lydia exhaled shakily. It's beautiful. It's safe, Elias said. For now. He helped her onto a smooth rock ledge. She sat still, trembling, clutching her mother's journal to her chest. Elias crouched before her. Lydia, tell me what hurts. Nothing, she whispered. Everything. He reached for her hands gently, like touching her too roughly might break her. You're shaking. So are you, she said softly. He huffed, a faint laugh that didn't quite reach his eyes. Only a little. She looked around the cavern, aware of the silence pressing around them. Where does this place lead to the open ocean? Elias said. And to Merrick Reef. That's where my father kept the final map hidden. The one Drake fleet wants. Lydia stiffened. The one I'm supposed to unlock. Yes. She opened the journal again, flipping to the pages filled with sketches, her mother's neat handwriting marking coordinates, currents, diagrams. I can't believe she carried the secret her whole life. She did it to protect you, Elias said. But she didn't protect herself, Lydia murmured. She died before I could understand any of it. Elias's expression softened. Your mother didn't just save my mother. She saved my father more times than he ever admitted. They trusted each other. That trust, it's our inheritance. Lydia blinked back tears. Elias, what if I'm not capable of doing what she wanted? He took her face in his hands. You already are. You're brave. You're stronger than you know. And you're not alone. Something unspoken passed between them, warm and fragile. But before it could settle, a ripple disturbed the underground pool. Elias rose instantly, eyes narrowing. What was that? Lydia asked. Someone's coming. He grabbed her hand and pulled her deeper into the cavern behind a cluster of limestone pillars. They crouched in the shadows as faint voices echoed through the tunnel entrance. 2 figures entered the chamber carrying waterproof lanterns. Lydia recognized one immediately, the intruder from the ridge. His wrists were now free. How did he escape? She whispered. Elias's expression darkened. Someone helped him. The second figure moved into the light and Lydia's blood ran cold. It was a Driftwood villager, someone she had served lunch with that morning. Elias's jaw clenched. Ronan. Ronan knelt near the pool, lowering a metal device into the water. Signal's weak here, but they'll find the current trail. Captain wants proof before we trigger the full collapse. You mean blow the entire cavern system? The intruder asked. Orders are orders. Drake Fleet wants the girl, or they want the tunnels gone. Lydia covered her mouth to keep from gasping. Elias's muscles tensed, ready to move, but Lydia grabbed his wrist, shaking her head. Not yet, she whispered. Ronan continued. Captain Merrick will lead us right to the girl. They're connected. He won't leave her. Lydia's chest tightened painfully. Elias leaned to her ear. We need to draw them away from the tunnels. How? She whispered. He squeezed her hand. By being exactly where they expect me not to be. Before she could protest, he stepped out of the shadows and onto the glowing rock ledge. You're right, Elias said coldly. I won't leave her. Ronan whipped around, startled. The intruder reached for his weapon. Elias lunged. The cavern erupted into chaos. Ronan swung the device toward Elias, but Elias kicked it into the water, where it sparked violently and shorted out. The intruder charged at Elias with a knife, but Elias dodged easily, grabbing the man's arm and twisting until the blade fell from his grip. Lydia, run, Elias shouted. She hesitated only a moment before sprinting toward the far tunnel, the one Elias had pointed out earlier as the escape route. Behind her, she heard the grunt of impact, the thud of bodies hitting rock. Elias's voice sharp and furious. Elias, she cried, turning back. He was locked in a struggle with the intruder. Ronan lunged toward them with a broken stalactite in hand. Lydia acted before she could think. She grabbed a loose rock and hurled it with all her strength. It struck Ronan's arm, making him stumble. Elias quickly knocked the intruder unconscious, then turned to Ronan, who backed away, pale and trembling. You betrayed your own, Elias said. Ronan spat weakly. Drake promised wealth, power. Driftwood is dying. You're too blind to see it. You sold out your home, Elias growled, and you threatened her life. Ronan's gaze darted to Lydia. Something cruel slipped into his grin. She won't survive what's coming. None of you will. Then he bolted into the tunnel they had come from. Elias didn't chase him. Instead, he rushed to Lydia, cupping her face, breath unsteady. Are you hurt too? She whispered, voice trembling. But you, I'm fine. Their foreheads touched, both shaking from adrenaline and fear. I thought I'd lose you, Lydia said. You won't, Elias vowed. You never will. But a distant rumble shook the cavern louder this time. Ronan's escape wasn't a retreat, it was a warning. Something catastrophic was coming. And Lydia realized with dawning dread that they had only moments left to reach Merrick Reef and the secret her mother had hidden there before Drake Fleet brought the entire coast to its knees. The rumbling grew stronger, rolling through the caverns like a warning drum. Elias grabbed Lydia's hand, pulling her toward the narrow passage leading to the oceanside exit. Their footsteps echoed chaotically, splashing through shallow pools as the tremors intensified overhead. Every few seconds, dust and tiny stones rained down from the ceiling. They're detonating the secondary charges, Elias said, breath sharp. We're out of time. Lydia held the journal tight against her chest. How far is Merrick Reef from here? Far enough, he replied. But there's a shortcut through the outer tunnels. It'll take us right to the reef base. They climbed a ladder carved into the rock, emerging onto a ledge overlooking the turbulent sea. The storm had calmed, but the waves still churned violently, throwing foam against the cliffs. Below them lay a small, carved dock, half hidden under the overhang, where a sleek, narrow skiff waited, its engines silent, its hull carved with the Merrick crest. "Your father's escape vessel," Lydia whispered. Elias helped her down the ledge. "It'll get us to the reef safely." As they stepped into the skiff, a massive crack echoed behind them. The entire cavern entrance collapsed into the water, sending a plume of spray high into the air. "Go," Lydia urged. Elias started the engine. The boat shot forward, slicing through the waves like an arrow. The wind stung their faces. The sea roared around them, but ahead through the mist glowed a faint shimmering blue. Merrick Reef. Lydia felt her breath catch. It was unlike anything she had ever seen, coral that glowed like scattered stars beneath the surface currents, swirling in perfect spirals around a large rock platform perched above the waterline. The entire place pulsed with a silent rhythm, ancient, powerful knowing. "This is it," Elias said. "Your mother's secret, and my father's last defense." They anchored at the platform, climbing onto the smooth stone. At its center stood a small column with a recessed compartment. Lydia approached it slowly, her hand trembling. "I don't know what to do," she whispered. "Your mother will guide you," Elias said. She opened the journal and flipped to the final pages. There, tucked inside, was a folded sheet of parchment. She unfolded it carefully. On it were 3 lines of code she recognized, not because she had seen them before, but because they felt familiar, like a lullaby she hadn't heard since childhood. She pressed her hand against the column. A soft hum responded. The water around the reef brightened, spiraling into glowing currents that illuminated hidden carvings beneath the stone platform. A faint outline appeared atop the column, a handprint. Her handprint. "Go on," Elias said. Lydia placed her hand onto the glowing imprint. The reef began to sing, or something like singing, a deep, resonant frequency vibrating through the stone, the water, the air. The entire reef lit up, revealing lines etched across the seafloor, currents, channels, routes, the hidden path beneath the southern passage, the map. "Drake Fleet can never find this now," Elias said, awe in his voice. "Your mother made sure only her daughters could unlock it." Lydia stepped back, overwhelmed. "It's beautiful." "And protected," Elias added. "Because of you." A soft rumble echoed behind them. Lydia turned sharply. A boat approached. Ronan stood at the bow, drenched but defiant. Behind him, 2 Drake Fleet operatives gripped harpoons. Elias tensed. "Stay behind me," Ronan sneered. "You think you can stop progress? Stop the future. Drake Fleet will own these waters." "Not while we stand," Elias replied. Ronan lifted his harpoon gun. Lydia stepped forward. "This reef belongs to Driftwood, to our families, not to your greed." Ronan aimed directly at her. Elias moved in front of her in an instant, but the shot never fired, because the reef itself responded. The glowing current surged upward in a sudden pillar of light, splitting the water beneath Ronan's boat. The vessel tilted violently. Ronan screamed as he and his men were thrown into the churning sea. The whirlpool formed just long enough to drag the men far from the reef, then dissipated, leaving only silence and moonlit waves. Lydia collapsed against Elias, shaking. "What happened?" "The reef protects its own," Elias whispered. "Your mother knew it. My father did too." The sky began to lighten with dawn. They stood together on the platform, watching the first gold streaks break across the horizon. The sea calmed. The glow beneath the water faded into a gentle pulse. Lydia slipped her hand into Elias's. "So, what happens now?" she asked. He turned to her, brushing his thumb across her cheek. "Now," he said softly, "we rebuild. Protect the village, learn the secrets your mother left behind." He hesitated, eyes lingering on hers. "And figure out what we mean to each other." Lydia felt her heart swell. "I think I already know." He smiled faintly, the first true smile she had seen from him since they met. Then, "So do I." He pulled her into his arms as the sun rose over Driftwood Village, painting the world in gold. Their journey had begun with fear and fate. Now it continued with choice, with hope, with something impossibly close to love. and Lydia knew whatever storms waited ahead, they would face them together. If you enjoyed this journey into Driftwood Village and the bond between Lydia and Elias, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Comment your favorite moment, hit the like button to support the story, and don't forget to subscribe for more dramatic, emotional tales just like this one. Your engagement keeps these stories alive, and I can't wait to share the next one with you.